Welcome everybody, I'm OneProperVarian of course, and today here we have a really interesting news showcase for the upcoming content for Crusader Kings 3 in the massive expansion All Under Heaven. We are going to talk today about after-action reports in China, Japan and Angkor. This is really neat. What this basically is, if you're under the age of, let's say, 25, right, so you were born not in the 1900s, well then all I can say is basically the way it works. Before we had Let's Plays, before we had summarized kind of uploads of content creators, we had this right here in forums. We would sit down, somebody would do a playthrough and then upload images. This is basically what they did right here. It allows us to go over the mechanics and see them in actual real-life application in, you know, rather than just sitting down and needing to kind of think of this. I really like this. It allows us to dive deeper into, hey, what can we expect? What will this actually look like? And at this point, I'm pretty confident in saying that the way that I see this is pretty much, I think we know what we're getting with this DLC. I would be very surprised if it wasn't the case, for better and for worse. If you don't have the time, let me just tell you right now, China, Japan and Angkor, so 2 in 1066, the first two, and then the last one in 867. I think this DLC will have a ton of content, and that is why I personally think that the vast majority of players will be very happy with it. Not out of, you know, like, oh look, they don't play the game enough, but rather, listen, everybody plays the game at different paces, and this is so much content, you're going to have a good time. I will also say though that from my point of view, I think my worries, my concerns for this DLC and for the content presented right here are at least somewhat confirmed. I think we're going to see this as we go through it. The last highlight here before we just jump straight into it is that I am of course woefully undereducated in the history here of East Asia and Southeast Asia, meaning that in this video we are going to primarily focus on the mechanics and whether they look and feel good, rather than anything else related to, for example, the history. Is it accurate? Are the cultures and the faiths accurate? The answer for that is that I can't say that with certainty, so I can't be the person that informs you of that here in this context. So I do hope that you understand where I'm coming from on this. Now before we jump into this, I just want to point out, and they say this here as well, that we are indeed looking at unfinished people in the actual after action report screenshots. I will give you all the relevant screenshots at any given moment, you know, just at the ready on the screen, so you can just take a look at that and check it out. The people there though, they are unrefined. You can see right now, of course, the randomly generated Han Chinese portraits after adjustment. They look great. I think there's a lot of variety going on there, and you even see details now like monoliths, like double lids. There's a lot happening there. I think that is really cool. The Asians in generally in CK3 have been woefully kind of, I think, underserved when it came to the way that they look, what the genetics could make happen, right? Because the game does work just with a genetic script system, basically, or a code system, I should say. The way I see this personally is that, yeah, this is really nice. I like the rework. Yet again, Alexander Alton, if you can hear this, please bring us salvation. Please give the artists of Crusader Kings 3 unlimited budget. Every piece of art, the entire map. I was talking about this and I was like, I don't know, does this look better? I like the way things look. That is all I can say. Yet again, they win me over, man. The art team, I don't think I even have a soft spot for them. I think they just always pierce my armor because they are so good at what they're doing. Now, I will tell you that we are looking at the first playthrough here in China 1066. I have a bunch of notes. I'll show you all the information, all the images that you need to see, but other than that, you can also simply listen. There's not really anything that you need to read directly. You can see the very first thing here is that we have a bookmark for 1066. This is a cool bookmark, not just because of the art and suggested characters, which of course largely mean nothing to me, admittedly, but also because they decided, hey, let's give them a custom character. This is super neat because what it does is players like me that don't really know the history, that look at the prefect here and at the queen, that say, I don't know what exactly that is all about, can simply say, you know what, I don't need to know anything. I will just pop in with my own character and create my own legacy altogether. I think accessibility here, definitely something that works in the favor of the mechanic right there. Now, in this playthrough, they were playing Qinghua. I think that is how it's pronounced. I do my best. Please do correct me. I very much want to invite this. I need to kind of just memorize the actual pronunciations, the general pronunciations, because it's not that difficult. It's just that there's so many rules, and unless I see them written down, I just immediately forget them. You know, in one ear, out the other. That is sadly the way that I work as a learning type. We are playing him, and I googled him. He is a famous poet. He wrote mostly love poetry. It's not really mentioned here. Of course, it is partially mentioned, but not who he was historically. He is just 17 years old, so there is a lot that can happen, a lot that can be done. If you start in 1066, the dynastic cycle will be in advancement. This is the Song dynasty. They are doing quite well. However, it seems, or maybe this is just balancing, I'm not too certain, that this won't last. You will see this soon, that the tension period comes across, you know, our planet here rather quickly. We start in advancement. It is a nice period of peace, stability, people working together, and so on. We also get, of course, an event right here that introduces us to serving the Son of Heaven. It is basically a soft tutorial if you ask me, because this directly also states, hey, you want to pass examinations and you want to earn merit. Now, just as a reminder, you will be seeing this, in the Eastern Roman Empire, which is bureaucratic, you only have influence. You can basically buy your positions at all times, because that is what influence does. Here, that's not the case. You are limited from certain appointments unless you have a certain degree of merit. This is important. Influence can still do things for you, but merit is what then even allows you to do things. It's interesting, and I will say, and we come back to the modularity of government, which I have given up on, just to be clear, but I will say that I would find it interesting as well if I could basically reform the Byzantine government or any kind of administrative government if we said, okay, hey, you actually made it so this realm is stable, you're dominating, I'm going to give you the same feature as the Celestial government because you worked so hard on this. I think that would be cool, entirely because at some point not being able to buy your way into positions would make a lot of sense for a resurgent Roman Empire. Now, of course, I also do want to highlight, and they stress it here as much, and you're going to see this as well, we are looking at examinations being very important. You have to go to them. There are different kinds of examinations, but if you don't go, then you are locked out. Keep in mind, this, what we're about to see, lasts for 10 years. This is how long the China playthrough here actually lasts. Think about other characters that you've played, tribal, nomads, administrative, whatever. What can you do in 10 years? First of all, obviously, we arrange a marriage. It looks pretty basic, although we can see the house relations are improving, which is awesome. This is, of course, something that hasn't been there before. Every house now has relations. Really cool. You love to see it. This is very fundamental, just basic stuff. We get prestige and so on. After doing this, you can also see that, of course, the art background of a character window is nice, the map here looks great, and China itself is basically in order. You can see very clearly that everything is divided in an orderly fashion of prefectures, because that is exactly how this system works right there. Anyway, they very quickly say, hey, if you check the current situation tab, of course, you can see that you can send your brothers to the children examinations. Sending them there isn't a full-blown, activity. Rather, they just have a chance of passing, and either they do or they don't. Chin-Go right here actually passes, whereas Chin-D does not pass, gets stress, maybe becomes a very aggressive fella going forward. Obviously, I gotta tell you, this is fine. This is just an additional thing for education. I really just hope, since you want to pass this, to get merit, to get better, of course. I would really hope that, it is rare that we take over a character that we didn't have time to groom just because of the way that it sets you back. I don't want to say that it doesn't set you back in other government forms, but in this one it fundamentally sets you back if, for some reason or another, a child wasn't sent to the actual children examinations, which is of course possible because this costs influence, so if their guardian doesn't have that, then that might not happen. I bring this up entirely because, again, it is so important that you make it to a certain point of merit, or you are not eligible for certain positions. Now, what we can do for ourselves is studying Confucian classics. This is essentially a scheme. You go ahead and you try to make this happen. It's a study scheme, much like a learning language scheme, that kind of thing. And this makes it so that you can get merit, you can get skills, and you can get exam advantage for your next examination. This is interesting. So I got nothing against this. I think utilizing schemes for this is fine. This is a self-scheme as well. If you follow the channel, then you might know that I'm not the biggest fan of the way that, for example, people are used in the new hostile schemes. Not because I dislike that they're there, but rather they are just modifiers. The people themselves don't really matter that much. It's kind of disappointing, but you don't have that problem here because it's just you studying. It's like a seduction scheme, I guess, right? So this studying right here looks pretty standard. I think this is not really that big of an issue. You can decide on how you want to do it. Do you want to be slow? Do you want to be diligent? That kind of thing makes perfect sense. Now, before they can even complete the scheme that would give them a score to, pass the actual exam right here, something else happens. And that is that indeed a local examination is being hosted by Governor Chen Ji. This is something that can happen. Essentially, you can see it right here as well. It's a very long path, so you still get notified of this. And I want to highlight this. If you do not pass the local examinations, you cannot rise up to the next rank of holding this or that possession. There are basically hard locks. You're going to see this in an interface in a second as well. Meaning that you want to go to every local examination until you pass it. Meaning if you have a bad character, it's probably going to feel pretty bad. It is interesting that you can fail it, right? So that a bad character could get stunlocked here. I'll be honest with you, there is an issue here, and to dive a little bit deeper into the mechanics, like I said this previously, obviously depicting history is something that I'm a big fan of, but mechanics need to be fun. And the administrative government already under the Byzantines kind of suffered from this. Like, there are difficulties, there are issues that will emerge if you have to face something like this. And I would basically call this the visceral nature of warfare, right? When we take a look at these mechanics right here, where you say, with a bad character, I might have to like study the exams, I might be failing certain local exams or then the national exam, right? That kind of thing. And if I do, I have to wait for a number of years and I don't know when the next exam will be hosted. This is important to keep in mind, because that gameplay is not very visceral. You wait, you get into an event, then you get a chance, and maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. Yes, you can prepare, but it's not nearly as visceral and fun as a mechanic like warfare. You get a very direct response. You raise an army, you left-click, select the army, you right-click, the army walks somewhere. You right-click on an enemy army, the army walks to that army, defeats it or loses. Whatever happens directly after you initiate the movement, and it is a direct consequence of the action that you have taken. When you design a system like the imperial system, or well, the administrative system in Byzantium and the celestial system here in China, and you don't utilize the existing very direct and visceral kind of ways that you have, there is a risk where you're kind of looking at a situation where, hey, it doesn't feel that good. Now, I will tell you, I'm not saying that this will feel awful, but I do think, since this is very activity-based and there's a scheme going, I will pray that in my playthroughs I won't be failing any of the exams, because then I would just be sitting there waiting until something happens. Now, the exams themselves we're mostly skipping over. They don't include much of how it actually functions, right? What we have right here is just a notification. Hey, we show up in time, we try to take the examination, we try not to cheat here. So if you fail, good luck waiting for a bit longer. You can build merit, but as you can see right there, actually, you can't cross certain ranks until you have fulfilled certain examinations, right? The children examination on the left, I think that is the one that is anyway, seems to be relatively optional. It probably doesn't lock you out of anything. It just gives you a head start, or it doesn't. You can see right here, of course, that the local examination locks you in at a maximum of the 6th rank, which I believe is duchies. You know, that is all it is, really. So you can have duchy tier titles. It's not awful by any means, but what I mean is indeed that this is do or die. If you don't pass it, you have to wait until you pass it and pass it and pass it, because, yeah, you can't really climb up the ranks through the regular system. That makes sense in the context of China, don't get me wrong here, but gameplay-wise, I think we're moving away from something that feels energetic, that feels visceral, that just gives you the idea that what you're doing is really your success. You kind of have to hope that you actually pass. And then we talk a little bit about great projects right here. We are, of course, looking at stuff like established control. I really like what the idea there is. You can pitch into highway patrols if indeed you are a military governor. So that means there's a certain limitation. You want this good standing, a favor of certain people as well, or press them into contributing, of course. So there's a really interesting kind of dedication there. And then the other one is strengthen the capital, which we could participate, but it seems very, very expensive. So this is being done by Huangdi Zhaoshu. He is a historical Song emperor, if I'm not mistaken. I don't believe I am. And he is trying to build up the celestial capital, indeed, strengthening his dynasty in the process. So far, I will say that whether the mechanics are the most fun ones that I can imagine, let's put that aside. I do think that there is going to be a lot that we can learn in this game now through a lived medium, which is super cool always. I think we have to keep that in mind. We can learn history, even if we have no idea about the Chinese civil service procedures. That is really cool. I love what they're doing there. Now, moving on, we have something here about movements. Movements, of course, you can imagine, are basically the factions. This is a really interesting way, and I like the way that they're solving it here, right? If you no longer hold land anywhere, and if it's not as family-based as it is in the administrative government, because think about it, that is all the administrative government is about, and you can buy your way into things for your very, very bad cousin. If you have influence, you can't do that here, right? This is about competence. So all of a sudden, family and land are disconnected from you. What do you do? We talk, of course, then in this case about complex political movements. And this is cool. I like the idea here. He actually gets invited to a conservative movement debate. In these debates, they basically debate. They try to figure out, hey, tell me about who should be our leader. Should it be this guy or that guy? They host debates. They discuss, I assume, the ideology itself, but also, of course, everything related to how do we proceed? What do we do going forward? This is neat. I like this. This is one of these activities that he can participate in, and once he clicks accept, he basically needs to choose a movement. Currently, he is uncommitted. Now, what he does is he chooses the advancement movement, and then we can see here a bunch of these movements with their modifiers and with their options. These are cool. So these movements get different options that they have. Certain things get locked, certain things get unlocked depending on the phase. So you're no longer touched based on involved and interloper. You are touched on based on which movement you belong to. I think this is really cool, the way that they solve this. I really hope that we're going to see an evolution of this system into a more complex, morph into a more complex faction system in general, right? When it came to the question of internal factions of realms in general. This is cool. I really like what we're seeing here. I hope that it plays well. Now what he does is he goes to this debate and he participates in it. He tries to gain an elder. Basically, he wants a mentor that helps him rise up through the ranks. He's of course not really interested in how this debate goes because he is not a conservative, but he is basically spending time there. He is getting to know a couple of people, right? Now this debate is also actually interesting because the way the sentiment works will then determine the actual new leader. I have to say, again, this also won't be too visceral. Yet again, we have an activity. We're looking at something where I click a couple of options and hope that I get the good percentages, and then I come out with this. Coming from, for example, Victoria 3, where I want to level up certain things. Coming from CK3 with hunts, of course, right? Where you level this up a little bit more and more and more, and sometimes there are events that will just drag it down. Yeah, okay, it's fine. I mean, this is okay. The backing that you have with other people, I'm sure will move it as well. This is interesting until there is a pop-up that says debate cancelled because there is a war going on. This is weird, right? Because this activity was meant to determine the ruler, or rather, sorry, the leader of the entire conservative movement, and instead, well, it just stops. So this is a county level thing. It's a border skirmish. It's basically nothing, right? And all of a sudden, Chieftain Huang Zishong makes it so that the entire debate is over. It is cancelled. Nobody is selected as the next leader. I guess the current leader stays in power. It's kind of weird. I wish that it would just take whoever was in the lead. Yeah, I mean, activities being cancelled if they're this pivotal for the future of a movement, it's an odd thing. Now, after a few more years, he is granted the prefecture of Jinshu, which is cool. I think he was eligible at this point already for a duchy. Basically, his merit ticked up over time. So he is now account level administrator, a governor here essentially. And this, of course, where we see these religious and culture map modes. I can't again really say much about this. I like the way that the map looks. That is really all I can bring up. I believe that I have seen some complaints about the religion in general, because apparently the song brought in a different faith than what we see right here, primarily spread out. And then similarly, we're looking at the Han culture being too much of a blob, at least from the way that I was reading the comments in the thread here, of course. But basically the idea is we become the count, and now we have access to something that is kind of cool. Here then we of course are looking at something pretty cool, and that is the fact that treasury exists. So there is a conception of money outside of personal property. This is the state's property, this is China's property. We've seen a very complex diagram, don't worry about it too much with how it works and what it does and so on and so forth in the past. I kind of hypothesized back in the day that I hoped, since this is a pretty closed, system, the way Treasury works, at least relatively close, that I hope that this isn't too easy to mismanage for players or the AI, because you have to set budgets, basically, and you change these budgets bit by bit over several years, meaning that you might be locked in and then things go wrong. He requests some Treasury here with his influence. It's only 60 influence. I'm not entirely certain about the scaling, but be that as it may, where I'm coming from here, it's neat that there is this individual piece. Treasury always gets invested, of course, into your county, into the title. That is where it matters. You can try to pilfer it, if you wanted to embezzle, then you can embezzle, but I do really like the idea that you can interact with this. He then upgrades a forestry building. We already talked about this, of course, that there is an incentive here that he can actually go ahead, or that he should go ahead and make the territory better, because that makes him a better governor. We already had this on the level of the Byzantines as well, of course, right? Because think about it, if you upgrade your location, you become a better governor, which makes you more eligible for future titles, yada, yada, yada. I think it is pretty straightforward here, and I really do like that line. Then something weird happens, and he marries his brother to the sister of the emperor. Yeah, I don't really know how to talk about this. It's pretty crazy that he was able to betroth him this quickly, because it's the sister of the emperor. Now, I have heard, or rather I've read in the forum here actually, that this probably would have been seen as a bad thing from the perspective of the family that we are playing here, because the sister will always be superior in rank compared to her husband or her upcoming husband, which would have been seen as a very problematic thing by the family right there, basically as a burden. It could have also motivated the Huangdi, of course, to act now against this family if they ever were to get too powerful, because they have a direct line to the emperor himself. This is interesting. It just seems too easy for me from a balancing point of view. That's really all I can say. We also do see a pretty standard type of governor issue right here. These are always pretty non-responsive. You can decide to let this person, either you show them leniency or you banish them. Maybe cruel characters can kill them as well. I'll be honest with you, these kind of events are never all that important. This is just a kind of, a randomly generated thing that you can act out. It's fine either way. Next up, and it is now 1071. We've already played for 6 years and we are currently a count. What he does is he collects a whole bunch of people that he himself says are unimportant and very uninteresting, and he turns them into disciples. This basically then gives him more merit. I have to say, I hope that this isn't like this if you are, for example, a ducal governor or if you are a king tier governor, because these people should matter, right? We already learned that you can drag them with you into movements, and then in those movements they will support you and they will reinforce your vision, maybe even let you be the leader. Him kind of just naming random men and women into these positions, it kind of rubs me the wrong way entirely, because this is the primary mechanic of how you get people that follow you around, right? We're combining the idea of landless adventurers having a camp and camp followers, and then being a landed character, making it so that there's always somebody that you care about. But in this case, we literally don't. They are just kind of buffs for our modifiers, right? Again, kind of disappointing, but to be fair, he's just a count. He's not really doing anything of purpose anyway. Simultaneously though, something much more important seems to be happening, and that is that the era is changing. We are looking at a lot of downfall, and right there, if you check this screenshot as well, but let me tell you as well, the Imperial Treasury is bankrupt, which moves this, of course, with plus 50. It also makes it so that if no civil service examinations have been held for 3 and 5 years, you also get massive bonuses towards the next dynastic cycle period, which is of course bad in this case, because it is tension. I'll be honest with you, I hope that this just happened by accident or something, because it would be really worrying to me. The treasury mechanic is pretty complex, it's different from gold, and the entire dynastic cycle and the entire state of China is kind of looking at it and saying this is important, we need to take care of it. If the AI can't manage it, then yeah. So basically all I'm saying is, obviously it's cool to go into the tension period, there's something happening there, but all I can say is only I hope that this wasn't because an issue of the AI to manage the entire thing. Either way, this changing of course to tension is interesting. Very quickly thereafter then it does actually also change, so this only takes a couple of months. I think this is basically related, very similar to the struggle. Once something is happening, it is inevitably happening, and the advancement movement is now getting different bonuses. Now after this happens, the Wang Di actually holds a capital examination, which is the next step that he has to pass if he wants to become a much better governor. He has to retire from his governor position, which may well be accurate. I, again, am not entirely certain. I don't know the history, but it feels weird from a mechanic, kind of. I guess it makes it so that jobs very frequently clear out, right? So you will always have the option to get a job somewhere in China, as long as you are a relatively qualified candidate, because people need to drop out to actually kind of graduate in a new examination thing. Nonetheless, it obviously feels weird, because that means if you go there and then you fail, you get nothing, and you have to wait until you get a random position, or there's another examination. If you go there and you succeed, then you also just have to wait. Yet again, here we don't actually see too much of a focus when it comes to the question of how exactly does this work. But he does actually make it to second place, and that is enough to not only pass it, but to also get a lot of merit that ranks him up all the way to 4th rank, and all of a sudden is he in a position where he can be a kingdom tier governor, despite of course only having served in a county. There are then some details, of course, about children and so on, but let's not worry about this too much. He is very soon after named the governor of Huaishi, and that is a duchy tier title. In the meantime, his brother is also actually getting positions. The entire family basically is getting better and better, which is very reasonable, of course, to assume. And then in 1075, there is a massive peasant uprising. We're talking about 50,000 angry farmers. And what I really like, and there seems to be some involvement here, of course, of these military governors going around and quelling uprisings. It is Intendant Huang Dalin of Qingshu that is requesting his troops, so his governorate is now giving the troops that they have to this fella right here, to the Intendant. We already know this related to Byzantine Empire as well. You can transfer title troops, right, that kind of stuff. And they easily crush these peasants. Now the entire thing ends when his wife cheats on him. He is at level 3 stress and he simply dies. Now this was 10 years, and I personally want to stress, I like many of the baseline systems that we have right here. What we see with the movement seems cool. Yes, the movement cancelling, the debate is kind of weird because of a border skirmish, but alright, so be it. I like some of these ideas, I like the followers, but in the implementation, well, he had a meteoric rise, right, towards being able to govern kingdom tier titles, but he also, quite frankly, didn't really do all too much. He spent 2 years, I skipped those, just sitting in his estate, and we know what that looks like because we have, of course, this gameplay in the Byzantine Empire. I will tell you right now that, well, in these 10 years, he did a lot. Rather, he was prepared to achieve a lot right after. But it wasn't the most riveting gameplay. He just went to several activities, and that was about it. So, for me, this pretty much confirms what I thought China would be looking like. I'm very interested in a China in a chaotic phase, for example, or in a China that is pressed by me from the outside. But I think the implementation of very indirect mechanics of you waiting, accumulating more merit, and then going to activities and hoping that the dice are in your favor, I'm not personally a lover of this. Now, let's go to 1066 Japan, which will probably be my favorite area just because it is actually much more leaning into these visceral elements of gameplay that we also, of course, have in other areas in Crusader Kings 3. So if you are fully unaware, here we have the screenshot of the 1066 Japan bookmark. We basically have a conflict. Japan also very much run like a governorate system. You have the Kampaku, so the current leader, the regent of the Tenno, and, well, he is slowly but surely losing control. In this case, we're going to play Kiyohara Takenori, and he is, and this is now interesting, a Soryo ruler. So Soryo are basically just the people that have turned their fiefdoms into anything related to hereditary. So they are now in control, they want to hand this down to the family. It matters to them. They have fought for this privilege, of course, and they are going to continue to fight for it. The other side of the coin are the Ritsoryo rulers. So these fellas are in a position where they act pretty similar to what is going on in China and in other administrative governments. Here, however, it's slightly different as well because, well, they can only ever hold one county. If you are a Soryo ruler, so somebody that inherits their stuff, that is not the case. You can hold more than one county. So once you break the spell, you can kind of go ahead there. Japan is in a super interesting position. Of course, ethnically or culturally, they are pretty much unified, but religion is all over the place. Again, the accuracy I cannot judge myself. The very first thing that he does here is pick up the elegance, the very first title or the very first perk of that legacy track, which is dynastic duty. You can see it is quite powerful for what you want to do, because we want to do a very strong house blocks. So house blocks are new and house blocks are really cool. They're going to be majorly in action right here. And you can also see that if you are a Soryo ruler, you can hire mounted samurai, which are an insane mix of units. I mean, what do you want me to say? Very, very powerful, very much also in line with Crusader Kings 3. The way that he wants to proceed here is very clear. He wants to push his power forward, and not just that, he wants to take away power from the governors, so from the actual normal kind of governance structure of Japan. The way he does this is by, of course, dealing with the house blocks. Now in Japan, different from China, since you have the dissonance between the slowly but surely growing hereditary rulers in much of Japan and the governance system, you can and you are meant to go to war quite a bit. Now this is a little bit difficult, because things here are arranged in a much wider kind of fashion. That is in house blocks. You can, for example, you see it right there, declare a block expansion war, but the entire enemy block would then actually come into this war and try to fight you. If you were to win, you would take the titles and then could distribute them within your block. If you were to lose, well, it would of course be incredibly disgraceful. This means that you basically have a bunch of pretty formidable and hopefully relatively flexible alliances. The head of the house block of course leads it, but just in general, you will always have house block against house block. You can also see that the actual policy of the regent and of the emperor makes it so that we are heavily influenced by what you can do. We see two examples of this. We see manor reform and we see imperial pacification. Manor reform makes it so that the central government can kind of intervene quite a bit more. Imperial pacification makes it so that you can declare external wars they want you to keep blobbing outside. Now, we don't currently have this, which means that we cannot push into the north. Instead, we will probably want to push into other areas of Japan proper. So he's now sitting there with his house block and he is thinking, okay, I want to A, strengthen my house block, and B, I want to ruin the governance structure of Japan. You can do this via warfare, or you can do this via inviting friendly people into your house block. This is the map mode for house blocks, and I really love this map mode. I think this is awesome. It's very easy to tell what is happening. The flags are so thematic. This is cool. I really wish that we have a faction overview of internal factions in, of course, our realms as well like this. This would be awesome. I've been waiting for many years now for a faction expansion in CK3. And yeah, they're cooking. I really want to see more of this in other realms as well. Of course, you know, then an expanded version of this, much like this is an expanded version of previous mechanics already. What he then does is he attacks an unaligned Ritsuryo ruler and marches his armies directly into him, crushing them entirely. This map, this art, I mean, just take a good look at it. I think it's really neat. And of course, he wins that war and the Kiyohara block expands yet again. He decides to actually hand this out. They just want it away from you, I think, because he hands it to his brother, who he will later take it from again. Spoilers. But basically, he hands it to his brother, and that satisfies the house block cohesion already. So if you keep it and you become stronger, that makes it so that cohesion goes down. If you hand it out, then it is all good. This entire deal, so taking land from a Ritsuryo ruler, is of course illegal, which is really cool. Think about it this way. Normally, when something is illegal, you just can't do it. That is the way that it works in CK3. It's almost like all of these people live in Germany. What I mean here, for example, is if the realm law says you cannot declare war, then you cannot declare war unless you have a hook. This one says you can't do this, and if you do it, that's a crime against me and I might act against you. That is a completely different gameplay dynamic because all of a sudden you can do illegal things if you can get away with them. But you know what they say, you can always do all illegal things at least once. After you do something like this, you can either seek a pardon or fear retribution. He fears retribution. He is much, much weaker than the Kanpaku, so than the ruler that he's currently kind of destabilizing there. But he just keeps blobbing because he wants to do this. Now, I do want to stress here as well, in China and in this playthrough, we're not really seeing too much AI activity. I'm not sure what the reason is. It's only a few years that we're playing here anyway, right? But I don't really see too much rumbling coming from the other sides of Japan. It is really only him waging these block expansion wars in general. Now then, a while later, after he goes about expanding, the Kanpaku shifts the imperial policy to disarmament to make it more expensive to have an army and declare wars in Japan. My question for this one is actually, is this a random thing, or is this one of those things that they actually do based on, hey, the Soryo rulers are getting too powerful, we need to contain them, make warfare harsher, and make it so that Ritsuryo rulers can actually defend themselves? I'm not sure. I have no idea, and the AI intention here will be very important for me, but it is thematically very fitting. I do like that for sure. It is at this point that we are diving into a screen that I really like, looks-wise. Now, I'm not sure how useful it is. I haven't played it, obviously. But basically, we're looking into the overview window of a house block. And by the way, in the top there, is that not the symbol of one of the spheres of influence, kind of like, you know, art pieces for Victoria 3? I think it is. I think I've played with these waves, actually. But okay, let's put that aside. The Kiyohara block is interesting. What we can see right here is that cohesion goes down drastically. His aspiration is prosperity, but other houses want something else. I'm not sure what they want. They want hands, and they want samurai. That is what I can tell. And that essentially makes it so that cohesion goes down. I also assume that if rulers don't like you, then of course they will go and say, screw you, I hate you, you absolutely suck. This is an interesting system. What happens next, I will say, is kind of odd. So he basically explains that when you look around and you're like, oh, people aren't powerful enough, and then you look into your own block and you see that cohesion is being brought down by certain houses having different aspirations from yours, you can kick them from the block and then attack them. It seems really exploit-friendly, right? Because in the time after you kick them, they will doubtlessly be without a block, so you can just eat them. What he started doing is he kicked them from the block, and he says that you cannot attack block members after you were kicked out for 5 years, but the block can attack you. To me, really weird. My notes literally say, weird as S, broski. He fights a lot more because he basically diminishes his own block. He kicks out, he takes the land of his half-brother that he handed him just earlier, you know, that kind of thing, and he completely crushes them. From there, from strengthening himself, of course, he actually goes against another block, the Kawachi block, and he barely defeats them. He gets very lucky in the sense that the armies didn't unify enough to actually challenge him. Again, I will say that this, the map looks gorgeous. I like the way this looks, especially coming from EU5. Listen, no shade on EU5, but EU5 is, in my opinion, just a height map that they threw in, and then they didn't do much with it further. Look at the stylization here. I really like this. I will say that it seems really, really straightforward to basically start perma-war in this particular system here in Japan. Now, after the initial phases, the Kawachi block actually comes back and beats him, and indeed, he is at the end of the line. Not only that, his son dies, he gets cancer, things are truly, truly bad, and from there, he dies at 69 years of age in 1073. If we compare the two maps of Ritsuryo and Soryo from the start and from now, he did a lot there. I will be honest with you, if nothing else, I think Japan looks like a lot of fun. It looks like a system that I want to play in. I can sit down there and I can say, hey, I want to be loyal and then I want to be disloyal. There's waxing and waning of the structures. I can participate in house blocks. I can have different aspirations. This system relies not only on theoretical things, on stuff that you do indirectly, on activities where you have to hope that you hit the success chance. It goes ahead and says, no, we know you like warfare. Why don't you go ahead and do a little bit of warfare right there? I like the system, however, I do think that it seems very, very easy. The AI seems too passive. It seems far too easy to blob a ton. If, you know, he performs slightly better in how he chooses his allies, for example, this issue is basically gone and he can probably be the first Kampaku in under a decade. Which is fine. CK3 isn't the toughest game, but yeah, like I said, it seems pretty straightforward and easy, despite the idea that the Kampaku could go against you. We'll see how active and passive the AI will be in the end result. Nonetheless, of course, he hasn't conquered Japan quite yet in this playthrough, but yeah, this is basically my reading. Let me know, of course, if you disagree. And now here we come to the very last of these playthroughs, and this is Angkor 867. This is the last proper type of thing that is its own government structure. Korea, of course, gets a little bit of flavor, but it's not nearly as bespoke as everything that we have here. These are God Kings. Remember, the way this functions is significantly different. You basically don't vassalize all too much. You make a ton of tributaries by being glorious. I said back in the day that it seems like you're kind of pigeonholing yourself. You have to rely on having one consistent playstyle and doing the same thing over and over again. There are elements here that I really like, but I think by and large I feel pretty much confirmed. We're going to play Jayavarman III, who is the son of Jayavarman II. I know it might surprise you. He lives in Angkor. I saw somebody in the thread saying that it shouldn't be Angkor at the time, it should have a different name. I'm not sure about this. I do not know the history all that well. Angkor supposedly is a relatively fresh name. Anyway, I like the way that the map looks once you actually come in. The tributaries, this looks gorgeous. It's all very easy to tell. You can also see that our realm actually pretty much is just the Khmer culture, so there's a direct overlap there. I'm a huge fan of the way that this looks. Seriously, the visuals actually have won me over. Maybe it's actually just me playing like so much EU5 and being like the map isn't stylized enough, you know, maybe that is true, but CK3 I think they're doing a great job at what is happening here. Gameplay here is essentially all about keeping the Mandala Radiance up. Mandala Radiance map mode, you can see it right there, shows you essentially who is your tributary and who is quite likely to become a tributary. You can do an interaction and then either you have to offer them something, sometimes you don't. If they're black, obviously that says, nope, I will never join you. And if they're white, then you can literally not talk to them. You cannot reach them. They are too far away. The way this works here is that you want to bring this up through a well-lived life, and this will help you then in a future generation to bring it up even higher. For this, you can adapt different aspects. There's creation, serenity, destruction, and trickery. These unlocks different decrees, different casus belli, and buildings, and schemes, and all that kind of stuff to give you different playstyles. Now, if you recall, this is a bit of an intergenerational thing, but basically, at least for your life, you have chosen one playstyle that you are committed to and that you will be doing. There are differences in here, of course, that is true, but by and large, again, you want to follow your aspect structure. I do really like the distinction that comes with this design, but they do state that it will permeate the descendants as well, which, man, it seems like I'm just playing one wider playthrough rather than individual characters. And I really want to stress this. This is kind of what makes it special for me playing CK3, that they are characters. I'm not just playing a nation, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, okay, so we choose something, and indeed in this case, we choose Serenity. If you stay at peace, so every 5 years you will get more legitimacy boost, and this makes you a good ruler. So basically, what they do right away here is we reassert a tributary contract by negotiating the terms that are worse for us. So we're kind of giving a little bit of leeway so that they accept remaining a tributary. Otherwise, of course, we could force them, we could simply be more glorious, that kind of thing. But this makes it so that they don't go away from us. Now, I do wonder if we have a ton of tributaries and a couple of them want to break away, like in the current situation interface right here. Do I need to like interact with all of them? It seems very spammy. That is really all I can say there. Now, after this, we want to, of course, look towards piety, because no matter what aspect you choose, you want to be a God King, and for that, we need piety. If you recall, in this particular region and government form, they also added more levels of piety, making it so that, again, you can go higher than ever before. For this purpose, they do a pilgrimage. One of the actual people here, one of our tributaries, breaks away. Of course, they don't want us as a suzerain, and we don't want to go to war, so this simply takes place. The pilgrimage did help with our radiance, but of course, there is more that can be done. Luckily, the AI comes here with tribute missions, which is pretty much the same as like, you know, paying homage, that kind of thing. So they show up and they can be like, you need to give me money or an artifact or nothing. And obviously he says nothing and he just gets the benefit from it. Again, I want to stress, could this be spammy? Now, what isn't spammy and what I really like is actually the situation panel that they are adding. They take a look at this, they see in what phase these individual situations are, whether they're going on, and so on. You can then also directly from there go and check out a situation like, for example, the Silk Road. In this case, he sees there's nothing that I want out of the Silk Road, so I'm not going to go to any of these trade hubs, but I know where they are. After this, he goes to another pilgrimage. Man, it feels like a playthrough here of reviving a dead, religion where you just go on pilgrimages over and over again. I don't know, all I'm saying is, it doesn't seem that interesting to me that I do a Serenity focus and all I do is sit there, get events of people coming to my house and saying hello, and then I go on pilgrimages non-stop. I hope that it's fun, okay? But that's all I'm saying. Now, this is just criticism. I haven't played this, I don't know about this, but from this description here, that is kind of the way it feels to me. Now, choosing Serenity is up to the player, right? I probably wouldn't choose Serenity, because just sitting there at peace sounds really, really awful, but this is what they've chosen, and this is one of the gameplay vectors that does exist, so I don't really want to ignore it either. After that, we are then moving on to the Majestic Temple project, and this is of course one of the big things. You really only care about one piece of your domain in this government, and that is where your Grand Temple is. It is a great project to build it, and it is incredibly important to you because it ups your radiance and so on. So all of the levels here that you get are super, super important. The moment you click Plan Expansion, you actually get this right here. This is a Capital Temple Complex Upgrade Great Project, which is a mouthful for sure. And this makes it so, yep, you need to fulfill these the same way that we saw it earlier with China. There's a lot happening there and you kind of need to go on and try to build all of this up. Now, luckily, of course, for him, you can get some of the tributaries, other people, you can force them, you can ask them, they might just do it themselves to contribute to this temple complex. There's something here that I really like and also really dislike, okay? And this is the Rite of Worthiness. The Rite of Worthiness is basically a mini-quest, an ambition, like you might be remembered from Oaths. Yeah, you might be remembered from Oaths. I like this idea a ton. I really do. Rite of Worthiness, if this was like a special thing, maybe a special pilgrimage, or acquiring a certain artifact, or doing anything cool, I would love it. I want CK2 ambitions back so badly. But let's read through the requirements here. 25 XP in pilgrimage, which means you have to spam being a pilgrim until you have it. 2 alliances with powerful rulers, okay, that's gameplay. Not declaring wars. 5 friendships. And 3 feasts with exorbitant and culinary art pieces. They force me to do so many feasts. I hate it. No, I hate this. This, like, man, Oaths did this. It really sucks. Super boring. Do not like it. And the rest of this playthrough is kind of just like this. He convinces various tributaries, like I said, to spend money on the great project. There's also a new Dynasty Legacy track for this. It's fine. It gives a lot of legitimacy doing pilgrimages, which you have to do anyway because of the quest, and additionally because that gives you piety, which you need. Yeah, it just buffs you. That's really all it is. You can see it right here as well. The Rite of Worthiness basically requires you to also have very similar requirements as the Mandala aspect. So these go hand in hand. They want you to basically have one and the other at the same time. Again, I am not a huge fan, but you can see that the tributary map has changed drastically. I like this. So he can invite a ton more tributaries. This map mode is really cool in general. And then he hosts more feasts and he hosts more feasts. In the meantime, something cool is happening in China because they rebel and then they splinter, and that's cool. And I like this. And there's a lot of action, but not for him. He kind of just chills and hosts feasts, and then he has enough feasts and he can do the expansion and he dies. And then his daughter can basically go and she can achieve more because he now already achieved aspect 2 and he has temple level 2 and more yeah, I don't know. Obviously warfare I think is more fun, but I think warfare also sounds like after 2 or 3 generations I will have blobbed to infinity, and that is where I will call the playthrough. These are not long-term invested playthrough governments, in my opinion. They are not sophisticated enough. This is just you climbing a ladder again and again and again, and you just do one continuous thing, because if you don't, then your aspect, this particular aspect, isn't going to go up. Yeah, I don't know. Listen, I don't know. I think there is a lot of fun in this government, but my worry is that I issued at the time that this is the most disappointing government from where I am standing, because it is so one-dimensional, not even two-dimensional. I stand by that. I think this is pretty much secured right here. You let me know. So this right here was everything that was in this dev diary. Japan, I'm looking forward to it, although it looks far too easy. China, I am super on the fence because you are forced into examinations, and I do think that China, especially if China explodes, looks really cool to kind of interact with as an outsider, but also as an insider. Southeast Asia, well, yeah, I'll play it once, and then I've seen it all, I think, because you just spam pilgrimages and spam. I don't see how you could. The way I see it, a couple of hits, a couple of misses. This is so much content, I would be confused, or rather, sorry, I would be surprised. I'm a stickler for mechanical kind of depth. I really care about that, more than anything else in my life. Okay, no, I care more for my wife, okay? But where I'm coming from is, I think people will really like this DLC because of how much is in there. Even though the systems, from my point of view, are pretty problematic in various ways when it comes to the mechanical design. Hey, be that as it may, they look solid enough that people will be happy, and then, for me personally, we can move on into a direction that I care more about. You know how it is, you win some, you lose some. This seems to be like that as well. Folks, I'm gonna leave you right here, and I will see you later, alligator.